How do I get a TVC role at Google? Is it worth it to join Google as a TVC? How much will I get paid as a TVC? What does the path to FTE look like? How long does it take? How likely am I to get converted? These are questions I get all the time on my lives, on my Slack group, on my YouTube channel. And so today I want to cover everything you need to know. And I personally went through this journey, so I want to embed a lot of my personal journey. And before we dive in, I just want to say I am 100% on board and totally support joining as a contractor. And we all know in August of 2022, this is a really funky time to get hired at Google. So let's dive in. And let's dive right in with item number one, which is the why. And I want to start with why I support joining Google as a TVC. And really, when we think about it and talk about it, nothing is more valuable than the brand. And so the sacrifices you're going to need to make, from leaving your full-time role with benefits to relocating to just taking overall risk, they're not that risky because of the value of the brand. And yeah, I get it, on your LinkedIn profile, you are going to have to put the external agency that you're working through because Google will flag it if you just write Google. But the reality is that let's take a large external agency like Randstad. You could say Randstad working at Google, right? And so it's still pretty clear that you're doing the work. And that branding is incredibly critical and incredibly valuable. And it's not just the brand, it's the opportunity to maybe join a big tech company, get in on a little bit easier path and see if it's a fit for you. And for most of us coming in from external companies that are not in big tech, you will get a large pay increase. Item two is where. Where do I find these jobs? And the reality is you don't. They're not posted. Now, Google will post some contract roles, but it's a really small percentage. It's like less than 1%. There are lots of fixed term contract roles. There's different specifications for those roles. They're also not handled by internal recruiters, whether those internal recruiters are TVCs or FTEs. You will be reached out to by an external recruiting agency that Google has as a preferred vendor. They'll reach out to you. So what does this mean? Get your LinkedIn profile up to date. Nobody watches that YouTube content on LinkedIn profiles, but that is absolutely critical to your success. And my story is I was in a corporate recruiting role at the time, and I continued to be given more and more roles, including software engineers, which I'm sure was a keyword search for my agency. And then one day I was contacted by this small agency and talked about getting a job at Google. So let's talk about item three. Process. Typically, the process is pretty straightforward. Most contractors are doing limited interviews, so think somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 interviews. That could vary depending on role. And typically, contractor interviews are shorter, so they're typically half an hour interviews, and decisions are made much quicker than your typical Google hiring process. So for me, I did have 4 half-hour virtual interviews, all done via video. One interview, the first interview was for a sourcer, and then the other 3 were for a technical recruiter role, all in the same day, and I was offered the job that evening. Item 4, pay. Okay, this is a big one. I want you to remember it's Google. And the vast majority of people coming into Google as TVCs are not working in big tech, and therefore, what I heard from contractors and from my personal experiences, they were making more as TVCs in their previous jobs. And while this may not be the case for everybody, remember, Google is one of the best paying companies in the world, and that will include contractor rates, contractor hourly rates. And that's how most TVCs are paid. There can be different pay models, but the vast majority are just going to make that high hourly rate. And some will be eligible for overtime, but this would absolutely need to be approved by your lead. Now, some agencies will also offer other items like 401k. You could pay into medical and dental, especially if it's a larger recruiting agency, but don't always expect it. And the last piece is you can absolutely negotiate your TVC rate. And my story is that the rate I was given was more than double my full-time income on the spot. And I also was approved for overtime as a contractor as well. And this really helped push my earnings up. But it was a very unique scenario. Our team was incredibly understaffed and we needed the overtime to pick up the slack. Now, my small agency, over time as I joined, started to add in 401k, medical and dental. And I also did receive a small bonus for hitting a number of hours working as a contractor for them. Item 5, perks and benefits. For most TVCs, the benefits are going to far exceed what they've experienced before. And the 3 biggest perks, in my opinion, the free transportation, which is the shuttle service, obviously most common in the Bay Area, free gyms, and the free food. And this can vary market to market, especially something like the shuttle service that doesn't exist in every market. But these items are a big leap for most. And as a TVC, you will not have a lot of limitations. Can you go to the holiday party at the end of the year? No, but you'll get all the other perks. Now, benefits are a different story. As a TVC, you're not eligible for normal full-time benefits, medical, dental, 401k, PTO, annual bonus, Google stock. Again, your agency might provide some of these items, but as contractors at any organization, you're not going to get these items for the most part. And my story from a perk standpoint, I took advantage of the perks to the extreme. I used the Google shuttle service every day from San Jose to Mountain View. I used the gym every day. I ate more food than most, and people know my food story. It's the thing I miss the most. That and the people, of course. And the Google 15 is real. So if you haven't heard of the Google 15, very similar to the College 15. You'll put on weight because of all the free food. Item 6, responsibilities and access. Like all of these items, this can be different person to person, role to role, but my responsibilities and access were the exact same as my FTE counterparts. And so were the expectations. I was expected to hitting my hiring targets similar to them. I could also add value by brainstorming, ideation, not as much project work as a TVC. And I was also given a mentor who was an FTE, and she was great. Thank you, Maribel. And then I just went to work. Item number 7, treatment. You are going to see all sorts of different stories regarding treatment of TVCs, and everybody's experience is unique. And I can only speak from my own experience. And the experience of myself and those I interacted with, overall, I felt the same as an FTE. I felt very connected to the organization, to the mission, to the vision, to the values, and I felt like I had the same job. I felt like I was given the opportunity and authority to make decisions. The only major difference I saw was the short leash. Hey, as a contractor, you were given a shorter leash to perform faster than somebody who was hired as an FTE, and that makes sense, right? Somebody who's hired as an FTE, they've made a little bit of a bigger investment, and so if you were not able to ramp up quickly as a TVC, they might not keep you around as long. Item 8, the how. How do you get converted? So there's a couple of items that I want to highlight. First, you just need to outwork everyone else, whether that's in hours, working smarter, ideally a combination of both. And this concept is frowned upon by people that want to be paid for all the hours they work, and even by Google, because they are supposed to pay you for all those hours. But I knew for myself personally, I was investing those hours in myself to give myself a shot to learn, grow, and get that full-time opportunity. So I did not log all the hours I worked. And if this is a stopping point for you, hey, maybe Google's not the right fit for you. Now, that's not approved. They don't want me outwardly saying that, but I felt like that's what I personally needed to do to get it done. The more approved strategy is networking and relationships. And this comes in a few different facets. First, within people in your own team in a like or similar role. You really want to find out who got converted on your team. Most people are very willing to share that. You want to talk to them about best practices that they followed and ask them, hey, who else should I be speaking to? Who helped you in your journey, and be talking to those people as well. Second is absolutely your lead/manager. In your one-to-ones, and you will have one-to-ones exactly the same as FTEs. In those one-to-ones, you need to be highlighting the fact that you really want to get converted and really be pushing that, driving towards setting really aggressive goals, checking in on those goals, and showing that you're making progress. Applying their advice can be huge, especially when they start to get FTE headcount. They're going to think of you first. The third is one of my favorites, though: networking outside of your group. This is really the extra step that most TVCs are not taking, is to network with people they interact with who might be in like or similar roles, completely different roles. But what you really want to do is, when you build relationships with those people, ask for an in-person or virtual lunch, find and identify 5 times on their calendar where they're available, and ask them for a half an hour of their time. Ask them what success looks like. Ask them about best practices. And you're likely going to be taking best practices, next steps that people on their team aren't even taking. And so maybe they consider you for a role when they're hiring, and maybe it's not even the same role. Really extend yourself and push, because building those relationships will also build your brand and build value. And so when you are going through the hiring process, more people will know who you are and instantly have a more positive outlook on you and who you are. And it's my story. I took all these steps. Item 9, the conversion process. This is the toughest part. You need to re-interview for your job. And at this point, if you're getting that opportunity, you're crushing it. And this is difficult because you've already put in hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of strong work. You've already demonstrated that you're good at the job, and now they're saying, hey, a couple of hours will determine whether you can get the job you're already good at. So I know it's really tough, but it's a legality item. They have to do it. They're required to interview you for the role. So the good news is you've been around long enough to really know what to do, but you still have to prep and prepare like crazy, and not only pass these steps, but you have to pass HC or offer review to be converted. And obviously you need to pass that last step of the background check as well. Item number 10, negotiation. Can TVCs getting converted to FTE negotiate? Absolutely. I negotiated very, very hard, and I had a great reason. They asked for justification. I said, look, I'm about to triple my hiring goal. I'm doing the job of 3 people. You need to pay me more. And that actually helped in my negotiations. I also encourage that TVCs act like external candidates and go get a competing. That competing will help you as a TVC going to FTE. Both my initial and final offer from Google for a full-time role were lower than I was making as a TVC. But I still want you to follow all the normal steps. We're going to be gracious and kind. We're going to anchor high, and we're going to negotiate multiple times. And my story was I was able to negotiate and bring the equity up quite a bit at the time, but that year 1 comp was lower, and that was a little tough. Now, one of the reasons for that was because I was able to log some overtime. This was a little bit of a tough transition, but I knew the long-term perspective was great, and it did end up being great. Item 11, my full story. So I just want to share a few details that might help give you a little bit more insight into what I experienced and how I went about this process. And so while I implemented a few items, I'm just going to add a few more right now. So I really want to talk a little bit more about the timeline and some personal items. So from the time of my first conversation with the agency to getting hired was definitely less than a week. I did not negotiate my contract rate, even though I strongly encourage you to do it. I was living in San Diego with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and I relocated on my own. She did not join me. I found a small 300 square foot rental a couple blocks from the Google shuttle. It was tiny. It was not nice. And then I flew back to San Diego every Friday and back to San Jose every Sunday. Now, we were renting in San Diego, no kids, no pets. And I was 35 when I got the job. So I was on the older end for an individual contributor recruiter. When I first joined Google, multiple people told me, yeah, they do not convert recruiters from TVC to FTE, and that I should just kick butt for a year and go join Facebook or another competitor. And I just went to work. And after 4.5 months, my wife moved up. After 4 months, and then at 4.5 months, I got the email saying, hey, give me your resume. And so I gave my updated resume. Over the next 6 weeks, I conducted just 2 additional interviews at the time. It was a GCA interview and a Googliness interview. I had to pass HC. And then in early December, about 7 months, just over 7 months since I had started as a contractor, I went full time. I was extremely fortunate. My team lost multiple recruiters in the early stages. I really picked up the slack and ran with it. I worked extremely hard. I also, again, got fortunate. I got a lot of hires. A lot of things fell into place. And Google, lastly, changed their policy. When I started a couple months later, they started putting more emphasis on hiring TVC recruiters into FTEs. So that really helped as well. So I got very fortunate in a number of different areas, but I worked really hard to get there as well. I hope sharing all these details helps you determine whether this is a good move for you or not. Good luck.